Hello viewers, here in front of you H.M. Kalita, Senior Faculty Member of Ecolabbo Residential IS Coaching Academy, Guwahati. Our today's discussion, again from Assam history, we will discuss here Partition of Bengal, Swadeshi movement and Monford reforms and its impact and its effect Assam. So let us start the topic. We will start first Partition of Bengal, then we will go to Swadeshi movement, and at the end we will discuss about the Morley Minto reform of 1909 and Montego Chelmsford, that is Monford reform of 1919 and its impact and its effect on Assam. As you know, Bengal was the nerve center of the rising Congress movement during that time. The middle class society of Bengal were the main behind the rise of Congress movement at that time. So, government got apprehended at the growth of national consciousness. Therefore, the government thought out a plan. Government thought out a plan to destroy the nascent spirit by getting the province partitioned. In order to destroy those national consciousness, those movement at the very nascent stage, government brought out a plan to partition the Bengal. The partition of Bengal move was inspired as much by economic consideration as by political ones. But the main consideration for the partition of Bengal was more about the political than the economic reasons. The European planters in Assam appealed to the Viceroy Lord Curzon during his visit to Assam in 1900 to improve the transport and communication of the province and to open an outlet to sea tagging Chittagong with Assam. Those tea planters, they want to have a sea route from Assam by tagging the Chittagong. Mr. Fuller, the then Chief Commissioner of Assam, suggested that the size of Assam be enlarged on the grounds of administrative convenience. For the administrative efficiency, the Chief Commissioner, Mr. Muller, suggested that Assam be enlarged. Politically, British plan was to isolate those Hindu-dominated Bengal middle class. Practically, British plan was to isolate those Hindu-dominated Bengali middle class and create a Muslim majority province on the border of Bengal. Fuller discovered in the Assamese, together with the Bengali Muslim community, a strong counterpoise to the rising spirit of Bengal Hindu nationalism. For this reason, the announcement of the partition of Bengal on 16th October 1905 was followed by vehement protestations and demonstration throughout the province of Bengal, which means that the partition of Bengal was announced on 16th October 1905, and as a result of partition of Bengal, there was protest and demonstration against those partition in the province of Bengal. Indian National Congress also in its annual session of 1903 and 1904 respectively protested against this scheme of Bengal partition. Presiding over the Indian National Congress session held in Bombay in 1904, Sir Henry Cotton, the retired Chief Commissioner of Assam, denounced the plan as most arbitrary and unsympathetic evidence of irresponsible statesmanship. Sir Henry Cotton also denounced the plan, and he announced that the plan was most arbitrary and unsympathetic evidence of irresponsible statesmanship. In Assam, both Sarvajanik Sabha, that is Sarvajanik Sabha, and Assam Association expressed their apprehension on the plan of Bengal partition. The Sabha, both the Sabha held that Assam will secure only a small fraction of the Chief Commissioner's attention, and her seat will be removed, and the people will have to meet keen and unequal competition from the highly educated, enterprising, advantageous situated districts, because the plan of Bengal partition will definitely give some of the drawbacks to the Assam, because Chief Minister's province will get very little attention, and the people of Assam have to compete with the most advantageous and educated people of East Bengal, and Assam was not at all ready to face those challenges. Associations of Assam and the Jurat Sarvajanik Sabha also apprehended that the historic name of Assam will be obliterated. The historic name of Assam will be removed from the history. The name of Assam will be obliterated forever, and her language will suffer a lot, and removal of seat of the government to a place outside Assam proper and further away from the geographical center will necessarily make her lose the amount of care and attention which she at present receives from the government. These are the apprehension of both Sarvajanik Sabha and the Assam Association. The associations considered it unnecessary to take Chittagong to Assam, since according to them, an outlet to the sea had already been there even without taking Chittagong to Assam. They thought that they had the apprehension. They knew that some of the members of the association thought that even taking Chittagong with Assam, the sea route can be utilized by those British tea planters. But European planters of the valley welcomed the plan of Bengal partition subject to the condition that under no circumstances the name of the Assam be dropped, because the Assam was always universally linked with those tea production. So those tea planters welcomed the plan of Bengal partition, but subject to the condition that the name of Assam should not be dropped, because Assam was universally known for its tea. Jagannath Borua and Manik Chandra Borua, two indigenous tea planters, took the partition granted and supported the partition plan with a condition that the qualified Assamese youth would be given full consideration, will be given due consideration in appointment of government officers, and also the Assamese language should be defended. Both the indigenous tea planters, your Jagannath Borua and Manik Chandra Borua, they thought that partition was imminent and it was bound to happen. They thought that partition will be at any cost will take place, and so they support it. Only their prayer in front of those government was that the Assamese youth should get due consideration in the appointment of government jobs, and the Assamese language should be defended. Padmanath Gohai Borua, editor of Assam Bonti, in his editorial in 10th July 1905, reacted sharply to the prospect of the new province being called the Northeast Province. Padmanath Gohai Borua reacted sharply on the partition of Bengal, and he called the new province as the Northeast Province. Anti-partition movement took the form of boycott of British manufacture and the use of homemade goods and the spread of national education, and with the help of Indian National Congress, the movement assumed a national character. Once Bengal partition took place, anti-partition movement took the form of boycott of British goods and urged the people to use the homemade goods. And with the help of Indian National Congress, the movement assumed a national character. But Curzon, the viceroy, was not the man to yield any pressure. He was determined to carry out the scheme, and partition became a fait accompli. The partition became a fait accompli that cannot be changed, and on October 16, 1905, partition of Bengal took place. A new province of East Bengal and Assam, including Chittagong, and consisting of an area of 1,06,540 square miles and population of nearly 31 million, that means 3.1 crore, is the new statistics. That is, the area will be, the new area of the province will be 1,06,540 square miles, and the population will comprise of 31 million. Fuller, the chief commissioner, was appointed as its first lieutenant governor with headquarters at Dhaka. This injudicious partition gave root shock to the Bengali intelligentsia, who were determined to meet the challenges. Those middle class Bengali intelligentsia were ready to meet the challenge. On October 16, 1905 was observed as a day of national mourning all over Bengal. In Assam, responding to the call of the Bengal leaders, Hindus and Muslims of both the valleys observed the anti-partition day as joint partners. In Dhubri, there are public Sankirtan where the Hindu, Muslim, Sikh participated. In Dibrugarh, a grand procession organized, shouting by the both Hindu and Muslim with the slogans like Bande Mataram, Allahu Akbar. So, those protests were also took place even in Assam, in Dhubri as well as in Dibrugarh. In the wake of the movement, the extremists came forward with their own slogan like total abstention from the use of anything that was British. Those extremists came forward with their own slogan of abstention from use of anything that was from British and from rendering any help to the British government. A number of extremist organizations were formed at several places of Bengal under the guidance of Surendranath Banerjee, Bipin Chandra Pal, A. Rasool, and Aurobindo Ghosh, etc. Leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai from outside the Bengal, taking up the cause, the militant struggle against imperialism, taking up the course and got the support all over the India. A rift between the moderates always sticking original meaning of boycott and Swadeshi. Those moderates, they always uses those boycott and Swadeshi, whereas the extremists, they give the extended meaning of Swaraj and Home Rule. A rift between extremists and the moderate took place in Indian National Congress. In Assam, Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary, Raktim Borua, Triguna Borua, and others came under the spell of extremism. Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary, who believed to have contacts with some revolutionary leaders of Bengal, started a voluntary association called Seva Sangha. Seva Sangha was started by Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary and his followers, and that Seva Sangha developed into a terrorist group. Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary wrote a patriotic drama named Bandini Bharat. Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary wrote a patriotic drama named as Bandini Bharat, but the manuscript of the drama was intercepted by the police. As a result, Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary was under police surveillance for 8 years, for a long time, that is up to 1915. Ambikagiri Rai Chaudhary from 1900, hopefully from 7 up to 1915 he was under police surveillance because of those patriotic drama and his Seva Sangha that he founded in Assam. East Bengal, now a part of the enlarged new province, served as the base for a new force poised by the British manipulation against the Hindu nationalism of West Bengal. So a new base has been created in East Bengal, and a new force has come up on that new base. Muslim League was set up under the leadership of Nawab Salimullah of Dhaka in 1906. Muslim League was formed in 1906 under the leadership of Nawab Salimullah, and they support the partition of Bengal and oppose the boycott of British goods. The motto of Muslim League at that time was to support the Bengal partition and oppose the boycott of British goods. The split of Bengal nationalist front was finally achieved. There was a split in the Bengal nationalist front. In Assam, Raja Prabhat Chandra Borua, President, and Manik Chandra Borua, Secretary of Assam Association. They initiated to submit a memorandum to the Secretary of the State in 1907, praying for withdrawal of Bengal partition. They also prayed of placing Assam and Bengal under the same governor, under the common governor, appointment of a separate commission under, that is for separate commission with a special separate service for Assam, and reservation of seat for Assamese in the Provincial Legislative Council. Both the President and Secretary of Assam Association, they initiated and submitted a memorandum to the Secretary of State in 1907. Their first petition was for those withdrawal of partition. Second was that Assam and Bengal should be put under the common governor. And third, appointment of a separate commission under separate services of Assam. Appointment of a separate commission with a separate service to Assam, and for reservation of seats in the Assamese in the Provincial Legislative Council. Keep in your mind three things. First, their memorandum carries, first, they oppose the Bengal partition. Second, they want that Assam and Bengal should be put under the common governor. Third, they want that appointment of a separate commission with a separate service for Assam, and for reservation of seat for Assamese in the Provincial Legislative Council. The memorandum, of course, bore no immediate result. James Buckingham, who was the only representative from Assam in the Imperial Legislative Council, was always concerned only with the interest of the European planters community. At that time, the only representative in the Imperial Legislative Council was James Buckingham. As he was coming from planters, so he was always concerned with the planters' interest. No constitutional means could be employed for solving any of the problems of Assamese. Government took steps to rally moderates by introducing certain constitutional changes in the form of Morley-Minto Reform of 1909, which created a separate electorate for the Muslims. By Morley-Minto Reforms of 1909, which created a separate electorate for the Muslim. It had also annulled the partition in 1912. That means partition of Bengal annulled in 1912. The moderates were most disaffected by the policy of divide and rule of the government and become alienated from the government. Instead, those extremists drawn closer to the moderates, which was manifested in the Lucknow session of 1916. Once the moderates were disaffected with the policy of divide and rule, they become alienated from the government, and the moderate and extremists they came closer, which was manifest at the Lucknow session of INC in 1916. Following the annulment of partition of Bengal, Assam again became a chief commissioner's province with a legislative council of its own and headquartered at Shillong from 1st April 1912. The restoration of status quo was a welcome relief for the diverse sections of Assamese intelligentsia, but people from the Surma Valley, particularly from the Sylhet, considered that a deep injury and a deep wound been inflicted on the Bengali-speaking population. So the Bengali-speaking population demanded for the separation of Sylhet from the Assam. Swadeshi became the national cry, and the Indian middle class started even grappling with the idea of Swaraj. So Swaraj and Swadeshi are the now new slogan among the middle class of India. Inside the Legislative Council of the new province of Assam and East Bengal, the hardcore agents of the government rallied these representatives for that purpose. Thus, 15-member council had 2 seats for Assam Valley. Those 15-member council had 2 seats reserved for Assam Valley. Those 2 seats were filled by persons nominated by the lieutenant governor. Those 2 seats will be nominated by the lieutenant governor on the recommendation of local bodies and municipalities on rotatory basis, and they were to be given final approval by the Governor General. Those seats to be nominated by Lieutenant Governor from the recommendation from the local bodies and municipalities, and that 2 persons should be given final approval by the Governor General. Assamese community, however, was not represented in council until 1909, when Manik Chandra Burwa was elected as the member from their valley. Council having an official majority and have no legislative power. Only after annulment of partition of Bengal in 1912, Assam got a provincial council of its own. So Assam got its own provincial council only after the annulment of partition in 1912. In the reconstituted Legislative Council of 1912, the government, the official bloc, was always in majority. There being 14 nominated members in the House of 25. Those reconstituted Legislative Council have got 25 members. Out of those 25 members, 14 members are nominated by the government. Prominent among the non-official members were Kamini Kumar Das, Manik Chandra Borua, Padmanath Gohai Borua, Tonuram Phukon, Ghaneshyam Borua, Radha Binod Das, Muhammad Sadullah, and Raja P.C. Borua. Those are the members of Assam. Now, those Assamese members, normally they always go for the Assamese sentiment. Assamese members of the council attacked the existing exercise on opium. Those Assamese members of the council attacked the existing exercise on opium and newly imposed grazing tax, annual fee on cows and buffaloes. But outside and inside the council, this issue roused great venom against the colonial rule. However, most pertinent question before the council was the opium policy. The practice of taking opium had become by now very widespread among the Assamese society. Around 75% of the Assamese people became drug addict, opium addict, and drug addict had demoralizing effect on the Assamese society. Yet the consumption of opium went on increasing under direct government patronage. The consumption of opium, which was estimated at 1,415 moon, one moon equal to 37 kg. Imagine how much drug, how much opium Assamese people consume. In 1905-06, Assamese people consumed 1,415 moon. That means 1,415 multiplied by 37, that much will be the kg of opium consumed by Assamese people in 1905-1906, and this amount increased to 1,615 moon in 1920-1921. From 1,415 moon, the consumption increased to 1,615 moon in 1920-21. In spite of such exploitation, the leading members of educated Assamese middle class remained mum. Those Assamese middle class, those educated middle class did not voice any protest against the opium policy of the government. The reason behind for their silence was only the reason was they have got a vital interest in the tea plantation. That is why those educated Assamese middle class always they keep silent and they never voice any protest against the opium policy of government. It was only at the initiative of a local social worker, that too under the blessings of government. An anti-opium conference was held at Dibrugarh 1907, and same type of anti-opium policy conference was held in Dibrugarh even in 1912. But it was not only the initiative of social worker, it was also the intervention of the International Hague Convention of 1912. Under the Hague Convention of 1912, the government of India had to take up the question of prohibition of opium smoking. Accordingly, the government in 1912 appointed a committee for the opium smoking. But government was actually not at all interested to stop the opium smoking for the obvious reason that opium revenue was the main source of British government income. Rai Bahadur Phonidhar Solia, a retired government servant, pleaded vehemently for total prohibition of opium. Although the government, in defense to the strong public opinion, made some cuts in the supply of opium, but thereby they have not effective prohibition measures leading towards a total ban of drugs were implemented. Government never gone for total prohibition, but until in 1938, when the Congress ministry came in power, they tried to total ban of opium smoking. Manik Chandra Borua also drew the attention of the government to the large-scale immigration of East Bengal Muslim peasants to Assam, which was going for several decades, for several years. He had also pressed government to amend the Land and Revenue Regulation of 1886 so as to make a rent law for Assam, defining the right of the tenants in different class of land. The British government also succeeded in poisoning the Assamese member and their Bengali counterpart against each other, which often led to communal rivalries. Thus, a united front of Indian members in the council was made almost impossible. Because of those divide and rule policy, there was not a united front in the legislative council. The election to the second council was held in 1960. Throughout the long period of tenure, Indian members in the council failed to achieve anything concrete for the people of Assam, as public interest in it dwindled to almost nothing. Radha Vinod Das and Torun Ram Phukon resigned from the council in early 1919 after a prolonged period of absence. They were followed by Phonidhar Solia. Meanwhile, Manik Chandra Borua died in 1915. In between, in 1909, even the moderate became disaffected with the government because of making the provision for separate electorate as a special favor to Muslims. I am talking about Morley Minto reforms of 1909 that gives special separate electorate as a special favor to Muslim. By the time Muslims themselves had also imbibed the new spirit of nationalism, and in 1913, the Muslim League demanded self-government within the empire. Thus, with the spread of Home Rule movement all over the country, the stage was all set for Gandhiji to launch his first experiment in Satyagraha in Indian soil against the European indigo planters of Samparan in 1915. This again became the stage for a rapprochement between the moderate and the radical inside the Congress and between the Congress and League in the wider national sphere. Both moderate and radical came close and inside within the INC, and INC and League came under the same umbrella to fight against the British imperialism. The Muslim resentment against Britain on account of her part in bringing defeat and dismemberment of the Turkey during the First World War doubly accelerated the process of forming a Congress League united to fight against the imperialism. Because of those Khilafat movement, both Congress, because Khilafat movement was supported by Mahatma Gandhi, as a result, League and Congress came under the same umbrella. They became a common front against the imperialism. Following the new alignment of the political forces, that means alignment of League and INC, following the new alignment of the political forces and Gandhiji's great success at Samparan, there came the alarming news of the collapse of Tsarist in Russia 1917. Looking at those scenarios, Mr. Edwin Montagu, the Secretary of the State for India, announced in the House of Commons on 28 August 1917 that the increasing association of the Indians in every branch of administration and the gradual development of self-governing institution with a view to the progressive realization of responsible government in India as an integral part of the British Empire. This announcement was given by Edwin Montagu, the Secretary of State of India, in the House of Commons. Thus, the reform proposed jointly thereafter by Montagu Chelmsford, that is Monford, it is short, it is called the Monford Reform, were published in July 1918. While making some political concession with certain restrictions, the government wholly rejected the popular demand for self-government. This was followed by a set of repressive laws to accompany them. These laws were drafted by a committee under Justice Sidney Rowlatt and were intended to replace the Defence of India Act. The Monford reforms were received with mixed feelings by the Indians. The Monford reforms was received by the Indians in a mixed feeling. First, organized opinion on repressive Rowlatt law was expressed by the special Congress session held at Bombay in August 1918. First, organized opinion on repressive Rowlatt law was expressed by the special session of Indian National Congress held at Bombay in August 1918, which also the INC also condemned the Montagu reforms Montagu scheme as disappointing and unsatisfactory. The Congress reiterated its demand for self-government within the empire. The INC reiterated its demand of self-government within the empire, which was reaffirmed in the Delhi session also. Congress now demanded that so far as provinces were concerned, full responsible government should be granted, and that no part of British India should be excluded from the benefit of proposed constitutional reforms. This is one of the most important part of the discussion. The Congress now demanded so far for all provinces that concerned, full responsible government should be granted, and that no part of British India should be excluded from the benefit of those proposed constitutional reforms. While the moderate leaders like S.N. Banerjee welcomed the scheme, radicals like Bal Gangadhar Tilak regarded it as entirely unacceptable. But afterwards, in 1919, on technical ground, both the radicals and moderate came together and helped in implementation of the reform. In Assam, the Golpra session of Assam Association in 1918 took a firm stand for self-government and demanded the abolition of the repressive Rowlatt laws and the laws in the Arms Bill. So, the Golpra session of Assam Association in 1918 took firm stand for self-government and demanded the abolition of repressive Rowlatt law and the laws in the arms bills. T.R. Fukan, Tarun Ram Fukan, attending the Calcutta session as a delegate from Assam Association, pleaded vehemently for self-government. In November 1918, Assam Association sent a strong delegation led by Nabin Chandra Bordloi to present Assam's case for award of major provincial status. Assam Association sent a strong delegation under Nabin Chandra Bordloi to present Assam's case for a award of major provincial status before the Montagu and Calcutta, whereby the Assam Association tacitly extended the support to Monford reforms. But again there is a but with no reservation. So the delegation led by Nabin Chandra Bordloi, they went to Calcutta and placed their case before the Montagu, and they asked for a major provincial status to Assam. And in the delegation supported the Montagu reforms, Monford reforms with no reservation. Soon the Assam leaders were in real mess. They just put their case in front of the Mr. Montagu for a award of major provincial status, and they supported the Monford reforms without the reservation. But during this time, soon the Assam leaders were in mess when the European tea planters from the Surma Valley, representing the Indian Tea Association, they pleaded for exclusion of Assam from the scheme. Those members of the European planters from the Surma Valley, they pleaded for exclusion of Assam from the scheme. The association, that members of the European communities from the Surma Valley argued that Assam had no intelligentsia. Assam did not have an intelligent people as such, that the Chief Commissioner of Assam also opposed to Assam's inclusion in it. First, those European tea planters of Surma Valley, they are representing Indian Tea Association. They pleaded for exclusion, and the Chief Commissioner of Assam also opposed to Assam's inclusion. Finally, the European Community of Assam Valley supported Assam's inclusion in it only on the basis of communal representation. Some relief for the Assam Association, because the European Community of Assam Valley supported Assam's inclusion in the scheme on the basis of communal representation. Looking at those developments, Assam Association sent a 2-member delegation consisting of Navin Chandra Bordloi and Prasanna Kumar Barua to London to plead the Assam's case for inclusion in the scheme to the committee of before Lord Selborne's committee. Assam Association sent 2-member delegates comprises of N.C. Bordloi and Prasanna Kumar Barua to London plead before the Lord Selborne's committee that Lord Selborne's committee was looking after the details of proposed reforms. Those 2 delegates went to London and pleaded for Assam's inclusion in the scheme. As the London mission, notwithstanding enormous difficulties, returned home victorious. The 2 delegates went to London and they returned home with victorious. But they found that the situation in Assam had already changed overwhelmingly. The scenario in Assam has completely changed. By that time, the people of Assam were ready to plunge themselves in the great struggle for freedom to join the non-cooperation movement launched by the Congress under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi. So, this all about the discussion on partition of Bengal, discussion on Swadeshi movement, discussion on Monford reforms. I hope you understand, you enjoy the discussion. Thank you.